Good day everyone. Today we will tackle about ecological succession, and the flow of our discussion will be according to our lesson outline. Our lesson outline are as follows. First, we will define the ecological succession. Second, the causes of ecological succession. Third, the types of ecological succession. Fifth, the stages of the ecological succession. And lastly, the examples of ecological succession. So let's start. What is an ecological succession? An ecological succession is defined as a series of changes in an ecological system across time. It can be simply defined as the process of a species colonizing an environment from a barren or unproductive patch of land or simply an infertile patch of land. Ecological succession refers to the steady and predictable changes in the species that make up a specific area. During succession, certain species colonize an area and expand their populations, whereas populations of other species diminish and even perish. Let us proceed to the causes of ecological succession. What do you guys think are the causes of ecological succession? The causes of ecological succession are mainly three types, and these are as follows. First, we have the initial or initiating causes. These causes includes both biotic and climatic. These causes heavily affects the population of that locality. It has factors like erosion, wind, fire, and natural disasters. Number 2, excessive causes. These causes are also known as continuing causes. This can modify the population to adapt to several conditions of the environment. The factors it includes are aggregation, competition, and migration. Number 3, stabilizing causes. These causes are the ones that bring stability to the communities. It has several factors like the nature of the climatic condition of the area, fertility of the land, and the abundance of availability of minerals. Let us proceed to the types of ecological succession. First, we have the primary succession. It begins in a barren landscape that has never had any form of vegetation and has never had any living organisms. The succession is delayed because there is no soil and the conditions are too harsh to support life. Depending on the substratum and the environment, primary succession might take hundreds to thousands of years to create a biotic community. Next is the secondary succession, which starts in areas that somehow lost all the living organisms that existed there. Since some soil or sediment is present, succession is faster. Forest fires, flooding plains, landslides, earthquakes, drought, overgrazed areas, storms, and other natural disasters can all destroy the previous community. Following such destruction, the ecological succession process will begin again under the environmental conditions. A grassland takes 50 to 100 years to mature, while the forest takes 100 to 200 years to mature. Next, we have the cyclic succession. It is a pattern that takes place in an established community by changing the structure of the ecosystem on a cyclic basis. In the absence of large-scale disturbance, cyclic succession is a pattern of vegetation change in which a small number of species tend to replace each other over time. Next is the autogenic succession. After biotic succession has begun, the existing vegetation is held responsible for its own replacement by the new communities by changing the existing environmental condition. So ecological succession driven by biotic components of the environment is known as autogenic succession. The changes in the composition of an ecological community is the responsibility of living organisms. Lastly, we have the allogenic succession. In allogenic succession, the existing community is replaced by other external conditions and not by existing vegetation itself. On a time scale proportional to the disturbance, allogenic succession can occur. Moving on, let us identify the types of successional communities. First, we have the pioneer community, which is the one that sets first in the barren area. Lichens on rocks, phytoplankton, and zooplankton in ponds are all examples of pioneer community. They thrive even in the worst conditions. Next, climax community. This is the last community in biotic succession, which is relatively stable and is nearing the equilibrium with the environment of the area called the climax community. A climax community will remain in one spot unless it is disturbed. Disturbance occurs frequently enough in many ecosystems. However, the matrix of the community types may be consistently present on the landscape. Lastly, we have the transitional or serial communities. These are the ones that follows the pioneer community. Bryophytes, plants, and bushes in xerosphere, submerged, floating, and other ponds are examples. They make the greatest contribution to the creation of a stable community. Moving on, let us proceed to the stages of ecological succession. The process of ecological succession was described by Clements 1916, and the following stages are involved in this process. First, we have nudation. Nudation is the development of bare area or nudation without any form of life. We have the volcanic eruptions, landslides, floods, erosion, earthquakes, forest fires, disease transmission, and other events causes nudation. Next is invasion. It is the successful establishment of a species in a barren area. Excesses is the adaptation of establishing species to the current environment. The individual species are then multiplied and increased in number through reproduction, which is a process known as aggregation. Next, we have the competition and coaction. After aggregation, the individuals of a species compete with other organisms for food, space, and other resources. Therefore, there is a new invasion of flora and animals, and interaction with the environment occurs, as well as the intraspecific and interspecific competition. Next is the reaction. Reaction is the modification of the environment. It is called the response when live beings influence the environment. Lastly, the stabilization, the stage at which the final or climax community. Stabilization occurs when a system becomes more or less stable for a longer period of time in a certain environment. And we are down to the last part of our lesson outline, which is the example of ecological succession. Here are the examples of ecological succession. Ecological succession can occur in a variety of settings and over a long period of time. Primary succession occurs when lava flows where new land has created. In Hawaii and Iceland, it occurs when a new sand is deposited along a lakeshore in Canada's Athabasca Dunes, and it occurs as a glacier recedes in the Andes. Next is the secondary succession. It occurs in many areas where conifer forests have been damaged by wildfires or where former agricultural land is reverting to meadow or scrubland. Lastly, the climax community. It is not the first community to appear on the landscape when succession begins. First, intermediate groups inhabit the place, sometimes for many years, and then creating optimal conditions for the community that follows. And that ends our discussion for today. This is Christine Pearl Delgado, BA Communication student, and thank you all for listening.